Virtues of Benjamin. This thing, it says at age 20. So this is coming off the internet, so obviously this is true. I'm going to be posting this photo here. That was a joke, guys, for you people. Don't understand a dry sense of humor.
All of those seem very like...
So that's something that Benjamin Franklin did. The Stoics had a different exercise, something kind of a little bit more similar to what Jannica actually does around how did she process her day. Mm. So I'm going to see if I can't find some of the questions that are very Stoic questions and see if I can share those with you here. And so that's one of the stuff I thought about but when Emily brought up this thing over the weekend, I thought, wow, that's so interesting to think about, bigger events like this and reflect on bigger events. And I think that was really pretty smart. So, Jannica, what are the things that you kind of run through?
At the end of the day?
Yes.
I asked myself what I learned that day and how I'm going to apply that to moving forward. I asked myself if I really lived my day in joy and happiness, or did I focus and spend time and wallow in self-pity or sadness or anything like that, because I don't want to do that. I have like the gratitudes, like what am I grateful for? And what I've been doing lately that's been really cool is it's just naturally happening. So throughout the day, when I start to go down, like feeling that down slide happening about something that I'm not happy about or not feeling good about, I'll automatically just switch to something grateful about it without even thinking about it. It's just happening. And so now my gratitudes at the end of the day are like, they're massive. They're not just simple little things. They're all of these things that are happening. What else? Oh, I ask, if something's weighing on me, I think this is one of the more powerful ones. Is this going to matter next month, next year, 5 years?
That's a really awesome one.
And if it's not going to matter next month, I don't even ask myself the other questions because it's not going to matter then either. And if it does matter, then that's where I go, okay, so what do I need to do? What steps do I need to do to work through this? And is there anything I can do? Is it mine to do, or is it someone else's and I just need to let go of it? So that's a big one for me.
So here are the Stoic questions. So these are, what bad habit did I curb today? How am I better? Were my actions just? How can I improve? What did I do wrong?
Yeah.
What did I do right? And what duties left undone?
Oh yeah. So that one, what did I leave undone?
So I
just put on my list for the next day, and I go to bed with that thought of not stressing about it all night. It's just like, okay, those are for tomorrow. I didn't do them today. Just let it go. It's done.
Right.
But then I ask myself, okay, tonight, do I want to just sleep and rest, or do I want to solve a problem? Is there something and then I just let my brain do either of those. And it's pretty amazing when you set that intention with yourself, it actually happens. Like, I can say, okay, tonight I don't want to think about anything. I just want to sleep.
Wow, that's really cool.
And other times I'll wake up with a solution.
Speaking of, you know what? Before I forget, I know our boy. I woke up to a message this morning that his ACL is officially torn.
I know, it sucks.
So that's why he was on cast. So that's not fun at all.
No, that's
makes it where you can't really hold your weight up.
Right.
And your knee will buckle, I think, a little bit backward, if I'm not mistaken. So it's really a really painful injury, and of course needs surgery, if I'm not mistaken. Ace is actually watching us here on Twitch, so if you don't mind telling us, you're going to need a surgery, or is it just need time off? I don't know how does that actually get repaired. So what we'll do is we'll figure out if you're going to go to surgery or not, and if we're going to be laying around for a while, we'll talk about a lot of reflecting. As you're reflecting on why are you watching us, and what could you do with your time better?
Oh, here's a good one that applies to that. What did you take for granted each day? So that's
what?
Yes. So at the end of the day,
what do you take?
What did I take for granted today? And so for him, it's a non-torn ACL.
Yeah.
But
well,
like we each have that. Where, and if you really intentionally ask yourself that question and you think through your day, there's some stuff that can come up. some opportunities to work on and disrupt the soil so that you can grow.
Yeah, that's true. That's really, really true. So I think, Stephen, how are you doing reflection, or how do you reflect in your mathematical formula? He's like, wow, I actually wrote an algorithm too.
Actually, it's less of the.
I actually had somebody who did that, by the way. Legit.
I mean, I'm pretty sure it is now something like an algorithm because it's very reflexive. But for me, it's more constant. Like, it's not a set. Like, I must reflect on X. It's more. I tend to go through a loop that is action was taken. What was the result that I wanted? What was the result that occurred? And then once I have quantified those two things, then I usually check with a couple of the people that were able to observe or experience that action and see what their response was, and then decide if I'm going to make an adjustment one way or the other for that. And sometimes the adjustment is I want to do this I want to have more effect with this action, or that action had an effect I didn't want, so therefore like I need to change it so that it doesn't have that effect anymore.
So guess what? That is a Peter Drucker exercise.
Yeah.
Did you know that?
No.
Did you get it from Peter Drucker?
No, I didn't get it from him. Specifically, that's from Command and Control.
What do you mean command and control?
No plan survives
Contact with the battle. Yeah, with the enemy.
So basically, you have an idea of something. Basically, the information you have available to you, and then you go out and put it into action. And once you put it into action, you collect new information to refine and determine if that was the correct action / correct intel or not. And then you go through that loop. So
The effective executive is where I read Peter Drucker's version of that. It's a very short little book, and it talks about these traits around being an effective executive, which really a lot of it was introspection. And one of them was that the decisions you made in the past are such a gold mine for understanding what your thought processes were and how you can improve your thought process. So if you go through each decision, write out what you expect to have happened, and then in the future come back and rewrite what you thought, what actually happened, and what if you know what was what actually was the difference. Like I thought this was going to happen, but this actually happened. Well,
Right.
why?
Right.
Why were you incorrect? Wow, what an amazing exercise! Because from there you can find consistencies and flawed thinking and so forth.
Yeah, right. And it's the only way to balance the tactical versus the strategic, because and a lot of when you're going through this exercise, you get it from usually like a squad level perspective. So like you have an objective you have to accomplish. The objective is the macro, but inside of accomplishing the objective, there's a lot of tactical decisions that have to be made. So you reduce the decision cycle down to something that's highly addressable. Like we're going to move one click that way. Inside of moving that, we're moving this because we think it has good cover / no enemies. We run into enemies, we need to readdress our intel.
I love it. One thing that has helped me in this reflection period, or incorporating into reflection, is adding time between my decisions, actually. So if I initially have a thought process or I have a feeling, it's then giving myself time to reflect on where that's coming from, and allowing myself to, and the phrase that Jannica uses is just ride the emotional wave, to finally get to the point where I can clearly come back to the situation and really think through what my decision really is about. Because a lot of times what maybe would be a moment of, you know what, forget all this, you guys just do whatever you want, right? Could be, well, this was actually what was concerning me. Why was it concerning me? How can I adapt my thoughts around it? And eventually get to the point where I can then relook at the situation and say, okay, this is really what I thought was the issue. A lot of that was internal. I dealt with it, so now I can come back to the situation with more clarity. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So that's been something that has really been really helpful for me. It's just, in my case, slowing down the decision process.
It's one
Yeah,
of the-
that's key for you.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those reasons why I don't engage salespeople until I've done my preliminary research and study. Because they are, at that point, then I am disconnected from any emotional impact inside of that decision, and they are either confirming or disproving my current idea about whatever this thing I'm trying
Beautiful.
to purchase.
I've learned to do the same thing. On big purchases, that's where I've learned to be much smarter about it.
Yeah.
And anytime I get in an emotional state, I tend to make a mistake.
And part of it for me was
Emotional only. I'm sorry.
my mom is really, really good at finding deals.
Okay.
She's really good at finding deals. but she also loves finding deals. So for
So
her,
she attracts them too.
right. So for her, the activity of finding something at a discount or finding something that's, you know, like below market price or whatever, like that's what she like really enjoys. It's not so much about like what's the effect of that purchase later. And so I remember always being in that state of like emotional excitement, and as an introvert, that's exhausting. So I hated it in general. And then on top of it, like I would look at the effects and be like, okay, if you spend money that you don't have here, then it causes some problem over here. So therefore, that's probably not a good decision.
Right.
You can't get lost in the excitement of the sale.
Right.
And so that probably, I think, also gave me like a more slanted bias against, you know, sales in general. But then on top of that, it's like, okay, like I had to reflect on what's the why of that. And then once I realized that, I was like, okay, I can just make a better decision process around the same activity.
Yeah, making sure you're shopping for an item, not shopping for a deal.
Yeah. And once I got
There's
into
value to it.
that mindset and like I knew my parameters, then it was one of those things where like about sophomore year, I had to tell my mom, like, I can't shop with you.
Wow.
Because I experienced, there was one time where we had to go buy, it was, there was some event where, you know, need suit and shoes, right? Suit was taken care of, shoes needed to be bought. We went to the store, we found the shoes that were the right size, color, shape, everything else within about 10, 15 minutes. And then she went to go look at every other shoe in the store, and it was 3 hours worth of trip. And that was...
Because that one wasn't a deal?
No, it was a great deal. We ended up buying those shoes. She just wanted to go through the experience of seeing if there were other deals.
Right.
And I was like, no.
No. Mm-mm. So do you guys watch The Good Place?
Mm-hmm.
Scarlett and I watched it last night, and
What is this?
it's a show with the really funny blonde chick who's married to the really funny blonde guy in real life.
Veronica Mars, the actress that played Veronica Mars.
I have no idea. who
Okay,
that-
I'm gonna look this
Yes.
up. But, and
Yes.
Ted Danson.
Oh, Ted Danson is like
So is this
God,
a
but not
movie?
really God. No, it's a
No,
TV
it's a TV
series.
show.
Oh, definitely don't
But
watch it.
Cheating, yes.
He can't make a decision in the one we watched last night, and it's basically what kills him. That
Yep.
one, oh my gosh, I was dying.
Indecisiveness.
His indecisiveness.
He's
the
like
whole
got
thing.
chronic indecisiveness, like debilitating, like for days and hours, cannot make a decision because he has to weigh all the consequences. And he is an ethics professor, and his indecision is what got him killed and sent him to the good place.
Which is heaven, sort of.
Right,
But he's 10 dead.
right. And so like he's got to figure out
Why what?
why he died,
Oh.
and like part of it is the indecision, which is still existing even in the afterlife. It's
Yeah, indecision's an interesting thing. So there's
It
this
is.
balance between decisiveness, indecision, impulsiveness, thorough decision making, these different traits. And I don't know. I think some people just have it figured out and some people just don't.
Kristen Bell.
Yes.
That's
Who?
the name. Kristen Bell.
Kristen
That's-
Bell.
Can you have a picture?
Kristen Bell, and her husband is what's his name? Who's in the funniest movie ever?
Dash.
Oh,
Yes. What's
we're
the
talking
movie?
about Dumb and Dumber?
No,
Superbad.
the other funniest. No, Superbad doesn't even qualify in the top 100. What is the movie? Do you know what I'm talking about? Where he's a cop?
Superbad is
Super
one of the
Troopers?
funniest
No.
movies
No.
ever. Officially.
What?
Superbad.
What are you talking about? No.
Ah, yes. I do know that actress.
Dax Shepard. Okay, wait. What is the movie?
Okay, so let's
I'm
stay
thinking
focused
of?
here.
Anyway,
is
We've
part
gone
of why.
totally,
Stop it.
totally off and tangent.
We're
Chips.
reflecting.
Chips. Did you see Chips with him?
People are gonna be reflecting on the show,
Oh my
going, "Why are we
God.
watching these guys search their computers?"
Abe, you would like that movie. It's really, really stupid. and
I
funny.
enjoy our tangents way more than I enjoy your tangents. So.
Yeah, your
Well, we all
tangents are-
like your face when you're on the show.
So I have
I'm giving
people
her a
who
complex
have.
now. It's like, oh, dang.
I have people who've been commenting how they do reflection.
okay.
Okay, well that'd be great because I don't have anybody commenting. On
Okay, so
tell us.
Charles says he asked himself, "What is the right thing for me today, and what does it take to accomplish it?"
So what's the difference between right and wrong and aligned? So what does the word right mean, Charles, to you? Because that's a judgment word in a sense,
Well, it's probably what he's aligned to, but okay.
right? And so what we've learned is really try to really focus in on that word versus
I'm so confused.
versus using words like, is that aligned with what I'm wanting to do?
Yeah,
Because that's bad, or things are bad and things are good.
not giving it a label. Okay, so then David Coy says, sometimes you have to learn a new skill, develop a talent or gift, or work on your mindset to be ready for the next step.
Mm.
And he says, you never fail, just get good results or not so good results.
You get results.
You get results. It either works or it doesn't. If it works, go for it. If it doesn't, make a new plan, do, and review. Yeah, it's kind of like my how bad can it be? What's the worst that can happen? And just go for it.
Mm-hmm.
I think what's the worst that can happen
Mm-hmm.
is actually a very, very powerful tool in decision making.
Yeah.
When I left Bell Helicopter, that was my decision point. I couldn't figure it, I was like going around and I was like, at the time, Noor's mother Noor wasn't even born yet. She was 3 months before she was born. There was a huge pay cut coming to associate, to quit Bell Helicopter, work with my brother, all that stuff. But ultimately, it's like, what's the worst that can happen? I'm not making a decision at this moment that's going to be forever.
Right.
And I think a lot of people make decisions and they forget the fact that they can just undo their decision by making a new decision in the future.
No, you can't undo your decision.
Well, you sure can. I can quit my engineering job, work with my brother,
That kid
and
can't
then
be unborn.
and then I can go get according to some people, you can unborn a kid.
That's just wrong. But
So, and then you can go, and I can go get a job at Lockheed Martin.
Wait,
No, we need to unpack that. I need a lot more clarification
What do you
on
mean
that
there's
one.
you can unborn a kid?
I was just referring to abortion.
That's not born.
I know, that's
before
what I mean,
they're
like
born.
unmake a kid. You said you can't unborn a
Oh.
I
kid.
meant
Anyways,
born.
forget all that. So the whole point was I could go get a
Not
job at
different.
Lockheed Martin.
right, but you can't. Okay, what I meant is you can't undo it where you go back to where exactly
Of course
you were.
you can. We all understand we're not time travelers. I just
But
mean this is not
sometimes-
terminal. This is very different than I'm going to cut my heart out and let's see maybe in the future I can put a new heart in. Like, it doesn't work like that.
True.
But people do this on jobs and professions and entrepreneur things all the time. Like, well, what if I quit the job and my business fails? You can go get another job,
Right.
and it's such a hard decision point for them. And I'm the same way as you. Like, well, what's the worst that can happen? And then what would be the outcome from the worst that can happen? And is it really that bad?
But then you think of okay, so that I think
Your
It's
necklace
really-
is funny. It's just, I'm just joking.
oh my gosh, it won't turn around, and he
That's-
knows it's annoying me.
Yeah.
Like it keeps flipping the wrong side.
It's
It's
bugging
like
her.
beyond driving me crazy. So see, I'm gonna spend my whole evening reflecting on that. No, but what I was gonna say is that applies. Okay, when you're talking about, say, your children, and there's something major that you need to think about,
Okay.
and make a decision on. It's not just impacting you, and you say, what is the worst that can happen? Well, you can't really think through what is the worst that can happen in their world because they have their own parameters and decision-making processes and whatever. Something you make and thinking, okay, the worst that can happen is that it impacts them in a negative way, but really it couldn't be that bad of an impact. But then you don't know how their own little brain or big brain chooses to skew that.
Little brains, right? You're good.
Whatever.
You're good.
And the next thing you know, they're like seriously depressed and they blame you and whatever. Like,
Yeah,
What
but
are
in,
you talking about?
but in a lot
That's
of
such
well,
a-
if you were paying attention,
I
you
was
said
paying
that.
attention,
No.
but I couldn't understand
Okay,
it.
who was it that we were talking about who when his parents got divorced, he heard they didn't love him
Yes.
instead of them, and
Tim
they
McGrath.
said,
Tim McGrath. He's
Yes.
actually, I follow him on Instagram. I saw him at Powerful Living Experience or something like that.
Yes,
PLE
yes.
in 2018. Yes, ma'am.
so his parents flat out said, "We love you." This he heard, "You don't love me," and he spends years and years jacked up about it. But when they went to make that decision, they were thinking, okay, he's a child. This is a decision we have to make. The worst that can happen. Blah 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 blah. They go through all that because parents don't make that decision lightly, right?
Mm.
You can't control what he takes from it, is what I mean. So
So why did you bring in a third party to this conversation?
because some of the decisions we make, we have to
Yeah.
think through beyond what is the worst that can happen. Because there's the worst that could happen to me, and I can be okay with that. But I have no control over the people that are around me, what that impact is on them.
On the other side
Right,
of
which is
that,
why I'm asking, why do you then bring it in to
Because
the
it's,
equation?
Because if it's
because it's in the equation no matter what.
Yeah, you can't just
Yeah,
get
but
rid
she
of
then
it.
also just said, well, I have no bearing on what the impact is for them.
No, you can't control the impact. You have
Right.
bearing on the impact.
Yeah, I'm
can't
sorry, you
control the
can't
impact.
control the impact.
Yeah,
so-
I can punch someone in the face. That's absolutely me contributing to that situation.
Right.
I
See
can't
how
control
violent
them
she is,
punching
guys?
me back.
Wow.
Very violent.
I mean,
Right.
so it's interesting in that case because I feel like that faces a lot of parents, and then there's a lot of stories about that where on the other side the kids are like, oh, I thought my parents didn't love me and everything else, and it's one of those things where the remedy might actually just be focusing on the kid and the therapy that's necessary after that,
Right.
as opposed to not making the choice.
Right. No, I agree. It's completely agree. It's also coming down to what's my business, what's their business, what's God's business, or so, you know?
Right.
Like, you have to let go of it at a certain point. But the way Abe was stating that, and it's the way I've always stated, what's the worst that can happen? Just make a decision from there. But then, over the last 2 years, I've really thought through, what are those ripple effects? What is everything else? That doesn't stop you from making the decision. You just have to be able to own that this could go really bad. Your decision could go
Years
really
from
bad.
now.
Yes,
Yeah.
for someone else for years from now. And you have the power in that decision of changing that trajectory for them.
Can I add to that?
And decide if you care.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the second part is indecision is also decision.
Yes.
And I think
Yeah.
people forget that.
Your choice
Every-
is to not act.
Right, it's a huge.
It is always a choice. Every
Yeah.
choice is a choice. And whether you think you're not making a decision, you are actually making a decision. I can decide if I'm going to quit this job and go start a business. Well, then you're making a decision to stay in the job.
Right.
So there's no middle point here. It's always a decision being made at every moment. And I think that's really important. And there's this concept that you actually choose your death. Because at any moment you could choose your death, right? And that's a true statement. Any minute we could be like, that's it, and jump out the window. But we don't. And so that's an interesting concept too, to just really think about.
Yeah.
We do have the decisions. We have the decision to be here all the time, or be involved in something, or be involved in a business, or start a new venture, or not start a new venture because we're deciding to stay where we're put.
Right. We have control
So
over
when
all that.
when we think about it that way, then it's not decision paralysis. It's like, no, you are doing really great at deciding. You just always choose to bias toward or decide toward what you already are familiar with versus deciding against things that are new to you, maybe.
Okay, this is awesome. So David responds with, if I am challenged with a decision and not sure about what I want, I flip a coin and let the coin decide. And if I feel good about it, then I know that it is. And if I feel a pause, hesitation, or not good about it, then that is my decision.
Ah, is that a beautiful?
Ultimately, I'm in tune, and my inner knowing or unconscious mind knows what is
He almost
what I need at
he
the
almost forces himself to have a sacral response to it.
Well, that's what I was just going to say. He must be a generator to be able to respond like that, the sacral response. And I've been asking myself yes and no questions something, and it's funny because my brain will click in, and I'm like, oh shit, that wasn't, like, I hear the yes coming, but my brain starts clicking in with all the no's.
So what does that mean to you?
Like,
What is that?
okay, say I have let's just take, should I have coffee this morning?
Okay.
Like
So
my
sacral,
my
you're like,
response
"Yeah."
is like, oh, or let's do something else. Should I have a piece of cake? Right?
Yes.
My sacral's like, yes, I want the cake. I should have the cake. And my brain starts going, no, because of X, Y, Z. No. Like, my brain kicks in with all of the logic and all of the reasons and counters the
So what's
sacral
the
response.
actual then? So in that case, what would you do? Because
Then I stop myself and I start thinking through it and ask myself different yes and no questions to get back to the yes or the no, like what that intuitive initial response was.
so that doesn't seem to help anything.
It does, helps me.
Okay.
Why not? All it does is make me aware that my brain has a strong capacity to override my intuition and my gut response.
All the time.
And I have to pay
Peop-
attention.
All humans are like that.
Right, but a lot of times we don't. We think, oh, our brain is the smart one, our logic, we should listen to it. And we do, instead of listening to our gut response. Because we've always
That is
associated that
super
gut
true.
is feeling, and we should
But-
listen to the feeling, which
But
is
you know what I
bullshit.
found to be also true is a lot of individuals will then go back up into the upstairs, change the equations to match what they really want to do.
Yeah,
Or match the reality so that they could be like, I was right.
100.
Oh,
There's a few
So
different ways
you
to do that.
fell onto the path you're on, dude.
So
So I think going back to the whole topic, which is reflection. If you could be
Yeah.
hyper truthful with yourself, you can really then understand, did I make that decision from an analytical perspective? Was it only emotional? Because you'll say like, I figured it out and this was what I thought. It's like, yeah, but is that really what you thought? Or is that what you thought because you really wanted something to be the case so bad from an emotional perspective that you validated it with a thought?
right.
That's really a lot of my decision. My decisions that haven't been very in line with where I want to go in my life have been a lot of those. Like I had this intuition, but I created a mental model that allowed it to go through. So
So you brought up decision paralysis the other day, or not the other day, like a couple minutes ago, and I realized that decision paralysis means different things for a lot of people.
okay,
And the most destructive form of that most people fall into, and they call it decision paralysis, is not exactly paralysis in the sense of like they're stuck on something. It's not following through on decisions made. So it's the taking 2 steps forward, 3 steps backwards.
That's really smart.
Because
Yeah.
what someone will do is they'll make a decision, they'll start down the path of said decision, and then they'll pivot backwards the other direction before any result from the decision can even be assessed. So they do not leave time for reflection and understanding what the impact of the decision is. They just go the other direction because there's some input that they were looking for that's not showing up immediately. So you'll see people dither back and forth between decisions because of the fact that what they're trying to get is, if they're being honest, is more instant gratification. And then they're picking decisions that have long-term effects and payoffs and then moving before any of that can happen. So it's like
Stock market investing 101, actually.
right. Most people do that. They chase highs and lows, and really what they're doing is not sticking to a method. They are just doing stuff.
Yeah, let me correlate that 100% to what I just said. I did
Yes.
exactly the same thing in my previous versions of stock investing. I would make an emotional decision backed up by analytics mentally, like backed up by my own thought process. I'm sorry, not analytics.
Yeah, backfill the numbers to make
Yeah,
it make sense.
like, oh man, this looks good. I feel, basically you're gambling in a sense, right? Or
Yeah.
you're playing that you're riding that emotional wave, validating it with, oh, look at the chart, look at the graph, look at whatever. And then it starts to not go right, and immediately make a decision to counter that instead of sticking with the plan. And why they, so many investors that just buy and hold end up actually doing so well because they remove that part of them and they just stay focused on whatever the plan is, which is I'm just going to consistently buy these kinds of stocks at these intervals. That's the plan. And you can outperform a lot of people by that boring, stupid strategy. It's like so rudimentary. And it just works for so many people.
That and, there's one key rule that most people don't understand about stock trading that they would help them eliminate a lot of the actual pain of the back and forth. Capital gains. You gotta hold your stock for at least a year so you don't incur capital gains. And most people get it with the taxes on trading back and forth all the time and not making any money. And they're like, oh my God, how did I end up under? It's like, well, because you didn't know this rule that said you need to hold this for a year no matter what your gut tells you just to avoid the taxes.
That's a good point too. That helps.
Because otherwise, if you do hold for the year and then you sell it at a loss, you at least get the losses.
Right.
If you don't, then you get it's capital gains plus or whatever, 20% is usually way more than anything you're going to make out of it.
Super valid. So, young one, are you reflecting on our topic today?
I'm just trying to figure out where that damn audio is coming up. It's your speakers this whole time. So,
Driving her crazy.
but now I'm less crazy. And I was going to say there's just something to be said for, I would say, a valuable way of reflecting and doing retrospection and stuff is to make sure you're looking back not with a judgment and critique for yourself, just an observation.
Mm-hmm.
You're reflecting. It's just a picture of what was. You can't be a dick to that thing in the mirror and you not be being a dick to yourself, which is not healthy. So
Which 90% of people are programmed to do that. They're programmed to attack themselves
Yeah.
like
and
you would,
call it self-reflection.
you'll
Yeah.
talk to
It's real good.
yourself in a way you would never speak to someone else because, well, I mean, you might, but that's a whole other issue. But generally, people are their own worst critics. They're not trying to give themselves constructive feedback. They're just, picking
Berating
apart why you're
themselves.
wrong. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So,
That's a
Yeah.
really, really awesome point. And you get into you get into your own court, basically. You put yourself on trial. And when you do that,
and then you get defensive, and then it's a whole thing, and then you didn't learn anything.
yes.
Yep.
When you put yourself on your own trial, you're the judge, the executioner, the jury, and nobody really
The
gets
court
out of it.
reporter.
You're
Yes,
everything.
the court reporter.
You're everything. And that's a pretty harsh courtroom for most people.
Yeah.
So yes, I totally agree. That's a great place to try to stay out of. And
And,
that's-
and it's unrealistic. Like
Yeah.
a lot of the harshness comes from people like overvaluing the negative elements that they can find and see and then undervaluing the positive elements. And then they're like, and then you tell them that they're like, well, I need to figure out where my flaws are so I can correct them. It's like, yeah, but like out of balance, you're not figuring out flaws. You're just practicing like mental self-flagellation.
Right.
Just,
It's
you
like,
know,
we
which-
won the game, that is the most important thing. That was our ultimate goal. Did someone throw the football to the wrong interception? I don't know.
Yeah.
I picked a bad analogy to.
No, actually,
Bad one.
that's actually a pretty good analogy in the context of how most people are programmed. So most people are programmed via religion.
Right.
And religion teaches you in general that you are terrible.
Yes.
Versus when you play sports, what pretty much happens is like we are training because we are trying to be the best. When we go out on that field or that court, we are the best people for this job. And then if we don't win, there are things that we can do correctively, but it is not that we suck, it is that we need to train more or do something else.
Be better.
Versus in life, most people are like, they've been told they suck forever, so when they see any tiny evidence of something not working out, they're like, oh yeah.
I'm the worst.
Exactly.
So the sermon this last weekend like had me all sorts of upset, and it was talking about basically being broken, that we have to be broken. And that way we're dependent on God and we turn to God. And
That sounds like a really dysfunctional, unhealthy relationship.
But it's really, really helpful if you want people to only depend on the church and give money over
That's
and over
true.
again so
Yes.
they can get their fix
That is
to
like
not be
straight
broken.
up
Yes.
abusive relationship 101. Let me break you down emotionally so that you think you need me for everything.
yeah, I really did not enjoy it at all.
Yeah.
I wanted to get up and leave. And I loved the speaker. He's actually one of my favorites. But the whole time I'm like, what? He used Fight Club as the example, like in tying into like the 7 rules that are in Fight Club, and it was a
I think
really
you're breaking the first rule right now, actually.
well, yeah. But anyway,
What's Fight Club?
what? Shut up. Anyways,
It's like working with someone who never grew up in the United States is really what it's like. Like, welcome to Earth. This is the United States. We have something called pop
the world
culture.
revolves around us.
Definitely.
It totally does.
And our missiles, don't forget.
But I don't know. It really like
Ugh.
sent me for a loop thinking through all
So
of that.
I would say that no matter what you would say on this particular topic and what you said and I agree with you, by the way, you just won't make a difference because there's individuals that just will not hear an outside
the fear
perspective.
of possibly burning for eternity in a fiery pit is more than people can.
Yeah, and so
overcome.
it's
Yeah.
really, I
Reality of
think,
you're making hell on earth for yourself and possibly others.
I think
Right.
some people get to the point that they're willing to think outside the box and wonder about our relationship with either whatever you want to call it. Let's call it God. Let's call it source creation. Let's call it whatever you want to call it. There's obviously
I'm
some
getting
spark
monster.
out there because you can't take a lump of meat and get it going again, right? Like there's some spark that makes life happen, and scientists have not figured it out. I don't think they'll ever figure that out. So whatever that spark is, I think comes from something very beyond this realm. I'll say that way. But then after that, the relationship that we have with that spark of energy and all that, totally open for different conversations. You know, I would only say that my perception, being a parent of has really been impactful in my thought processes of that. I wouldn't want to mimic the relationship as described in a lot of different, religious books with the relationship I have with my child. I just wouldn't.
Yeah.
Like, you jacked up, you are now no longer in the big house, you are now in the doghouse.
You are shunned or
And so whatever, right? Like, I
all
just
these
can't
things.
relate, I can't understand some of the stories and some of those thought processes. Because as I reflect my relationship with my child, knowing my child has free will and knowing my child can make decisions on its own, her own, his own, whatever, that, it's trying to balance that. I mean, some decisions are difficult and they're frustrating. And a lot of that actually is just my desire to control the situation or really hope for the best actually for them. Or my desire to control the situation where I want them to not make noise and interrupt my movie or whatever it is, right? Like, it is really around those things. But it's really not, like, I would not imagine putting my kid, in an oven because the kid just messed up. And usually messed up things, like in the United States where we criminalize drug users and drug addicts, it's like,
no, it doesn't make any sense.
it doesn't make sense. Like, there's something wrong where an individual will destroy their life and their teeth and their hair and all this stuff. Like, where's the compassion for, like, man, what fucking happened, dude?
Well, that's part of it. It's like by the time someone has fallen that low into addiction, I would be hard pressed to find anyone who is at a party and like experimenting who's like, you know what, I want meth mouth. I want it so bad. I'm gonna do all the meth. I cannot wait till all my teeth fall out and I scratch all my skin off.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not what people are going for.
No.
They're trying to either have fun and try something that they know someone else has done,
Or
they get
escape.
control, or escape, or try and
Whatever it
avoid
is,
something.
whatever it is, it's coming from a place of probably turmoil or some word like that. And I think those individuals need love and compassion rather than
Well, I was gonna say,
jail
in this
and-
country,
and
Right,
beatings in other countries.
in this country, we talk about all these other drugs. We're like, okay, the opioid crisis that's now finally on the news. We're creating generations of heroin addicts, basically, because it's harder to get prescription pills
Mm-hmm.
than it is to get heroin, and heroin's cheaper, sadly and terrifyingly. So,
It's easier to get prescription pills. You
No.
said harder.
not necessarily.
Now, they're starting to make it much harder to get the prescription pills, which is the reason fentanyl and the rest of those things are popping up.
Well, now they're starting to, but this is a long process uphill.
Yeah.
I read somewhere where
Right.
one
It's like
little
one-
district in whatever one of these small states
But, like, your
cranked
doctor
out
can
like
give you
90
heroin
billion
and that's
pills in a month or
totally
something. You're like,
okay. Yeah.
the number was staggering. It was like every adult citizen in that state could have had blank number of pills in a month. Like
Mhm.
every
You know what?
citizen.
And then.
So, anyways, that's another thing.
Well, it comes.
That's kind of the reflection. It's like, ooh.
Okay, TNG.
But it also comes back to.
I love Tangy.
It also comes back to the whole reflection thing, because when you look at when
The
you were
decisions that were made, steps A,
getting
B,
up to
C, and
getting up to
D.
that point, and what was the actual goal, most people were like, well, this was something I was supposed to help people when it got out of hand. But then when you realize it actually had nothing to do with helping people, and it was all about like how much profit could be generated, because about 4 years ago, people came up with an alternative to opioids that had the same effect, and it got scheduled. It's the fastest thing to ever become Schedule 1 in this country ever.
What was it?
It was called. I think it was called kratom.
Yes,
And
I remember that.
It's a plant that grows in China that they powdered it and they were shipping it over here, and it does the anti-inflammatory and it pain relief and all this other stuff. Doesn't get anybody high. There was about they said they had like 300 complaints over 5 years for people going to the hospital saying like, I think this thing may have affected me adversely. None of those were fatal. Right, that's like a 0.0001% of all the things that come in, and they're like, no, we have to schedule this thing because it's direct competition to.
Of course, it's direct competition.
Yeah.
Everything for everybody all the time is always directed at what's in it for me.
Yep.
Yeah.
So anytime you have, that's anybody, me on the show, like there is always a selfish motive to everything we do as humans, period. And anybody who would say anything differently they're not being honest.
Yeah, of
They're
course.
just not.
Well,
So,
that or they're just they haven't done any deeper dive into like what actually drives.
but
stuff
they
around.
will never withstand a thorough questioning as to their motives, because ultimately we'll find out that their motives are also selfish. Everybody. And that's okay.
Yeah.
Right. So, anyways, getting past that, any decision, any kind of big drug push in this country, I always wonder very specifically what's actually at play here.
Mhm.
Right. It doesn't even matter what it is. Anything that somebody tells me exactly what I cannot or cannot do, I always wonder, why not?
Yeah.
Can't eat eggs. Why? Now, I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm more like, I want to understand.
Like,
And I want to
yeah.
understand, where is the financial motivator? Either it's the insurance companies don't want you dying because they don't want to pay for it.
Right.
Is it the cereal companies want you to eat more cereal, so don't eat the egg, so they're going to put their bullshit out, right?
Right.
It's always something. If you can get to the point, I've understood this. If I can get to the point to understand, really, really, really think in the other person's mind, what's in it for them, what are they looking for, what are they wanting, it makes all the decision processes so much easier. And that means, for me, it's removing the bullshit that people say and looking at their financial motivators, looking at and financial motivator, I'm saying that, I'm going to use the word finances in loose terms, because some of it could be not money. Some of it could be they're looking for prestige.
Influence or
They're looking for
control.
influence. They're looking for a pat on the back. Whatever the fuck it is, if you think of in those terms, it's so easy to sit down and create a deal that's a win-win. It's like, you need these things scratched. I need these things done. I think we can make a deal. And then you get onto this like,
The government needs to sell all this cheese. We need to sell more dairy. Got milk. Yes, people need milk now.
100%. Oh, yes. These are the kind of things that happen. So think about it very carefully. Any new initiative that ever is launched, think very, very carefully.
Yeah.
Why is this a new initiative? Who
Unless
is
we
to
think
blame
of it,
for
I think
it?
you should definitely just go along with it.
Some things are really
Yeah.
good. Some things are not necessarily so good.
Like, for instance, one of the reasons why we still have a certain car company around, Jeep. Why does Jeep exist?
Jeep,
Yes.
I do not know.
So Jeep exists because there was a fuck ton of Jeeps after World War II, and they
Oh,
spun
yes.
off the division that
That's right.
maintained and manufactured them into an American car company.
But what does that have to do with being forced down our throats?
It's not forced down their throats. It's just that like that car company technically should have been dead a long time ago, but it's still around because it was ingrained in our ethos. It has nothing to do with whether or not those cars are good, whether or not they serve a certain purpose. Like they really, I mean, like the Hummer was useless too, but it was part of that ethos, and they're like, oh, we can do it again. But all of it is totally unrelated to a financial and like a business sense. They're like surplus free cars. Of course, you're going to sell them. Right? And then you're like, oh, we can make more of them because now it's like tied to patriotism, Memorial Day, and flags, and all of the other stuff,
America? Fuck
right?
Yeah.
Like that brand, of all the brands that died, right? Of all the brands that died during the recession when they had to downsize everything and sell off all these different car lines because they weren't profitable anymore, Jeep should have gone.
Well, didn't Chrysler,
totally
like
fucked.
Daimler Chrysler got like bought by like Fiat or something too.
Exactly.
So it's like they kind of did. They just like, let's
So now our Jeeps are not even American.
no.
Like,
Yeah, it's just.
but it's one of those things where like it just moves on by inertia because it was tied to something totally unrelated to like actual finances.
So
Yeah.
you slap a flag on anything, people will buy it. Or honestly, not to be, I mean, I 100% support breast cancer research. Stick a pink ribbon on it.
Yep.
People will buy it.
I know,
Stick a
it's
flag on it. People will
crazy.
buy it. Stick a cross on it. People will buy it. It does not matter. If
Yeah,
it's
I don't
a
want
garbage
breast cancer
product.
research. I want breast cancer cure. Like, they already tell you exactly what they need your money for to go
Yeah.
research. Well, that doesn't fucking solve the problem. Like, I just want to know what's actually causing this and how can you solve it.
Right.
But those things are not sexy because those things mean, you know, let's talk about the things that are not the pill form, which require a fundamental change in the way we approach life.
Right. But
So let's not talk about that
Food.
stuff because that's, you know, food and exercise, mental condition.
Our environment that we're in.
I'll
making
tell
sure
you
we're
something
not
that's really-
poisoning ourselves incidentally.
Yep.
I think something that's been really powerful for me is understanding the link between mental state and physical manifestations of issues. Meaning to say, I'll take an extreme example here. If I'm consistently stressed, consistently fatigued, worried, doubt myself, you know, all of those things that would exert themselves in an outward appearance of somebody who's on a nervous breakdown, on the cusp of a nervous breakdown. And instead, not only do I try to mask that I internalize it. I push all of those emotions internal. Surely that has got to have an issue with the way the functioning of the systems that are happening inside the body,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like this doesn't have to get into double-blinded studies. Just use your mind here and just think through this. So whenever we have those issues that we have not reflected upon, brought out, God help, doing those things that Stephen Hayes would just call life coaches sometimes to help you get through some of these things.
well, no, I mean I don't hate
I
them.
know,
I just
I'm
gotta
just saying.
qualify them.
I know, just joking. You know,
Mm.
those are things that can actually drive your health. That
Yeah.
makes sense to
Yes.
me.
Yes.
Oh.
Taking a freaking pill or
Changing
paying
your
billions and
environment.
billions and
Not
billions of
take
dollars.
a pill. Taking a pill is easier than like having a difficult meeting with your boss or a friend that's or a relative.
Yeah.
It's so much easier. I'm just gonna put a pill on it
And then
hope
fix
for the
it.
No,
best.
so I mean,
it's
go study these
acknowledging
things.
it, just acknowledging it that it's there. That's what happened to me today on his table. So for the last
Oh, yes.
week, there's been lots of heaviness in my chest, and I'm not breathing deeply. I'm not getting the oxygen, and I'm very much like reserved and holding on to something. It's that fear of flight thing. That's something's going on. And laying at the chiropractor and laying on his table.
She was doing this in the lobby. It was freaking people out. She was laying on the table. Yeah.
But it was very like consciously. I was feeling the energy as he's working through me, and I'm like, oh shit, this is me. Of course, this is what I'm doing to myself. It's not physical. It's not my body.
Oh, yeah,
It
yeah.
is me. And as soon as and as I was walking around the room, he told me to get up and walk around the room, and I coughed and coughed and coughed and coughed, and it was like, then I could start taking deep breaths. But it wouldn't have happened if I hadn't acknowledged it.
I just want to be neurotic with no consequences.
Yes.
Too much gas. God damn it.
But then I'm laying on the table afterwards, after I walked around and coughed
So
my
much.
lungs out, and laid down, and I could feel as he was doing the different like things that he does that's magic, like this peace and this energy and just this like almost like a flushing like down my spine. And I was like, oh my God, I can breathe again. I don't feel the fear of the flight or what is it?
Fight or
flight.
Right.
It's like,
idiot.
So
you didn't. So basically, it stopped the whole adrenaline production that was causing the tenseness.
that has been there for probably a week.
Side note, fight or flight. So there's also the other ones of like fawn and freeze. I always think that's really interesting when you bring that up.
Can you talk about that real fast?
Freeze.
So fight or flight, people are like, oh, you're going to either run away or fight. But a
there's
extremely
another
more
one.
common one is you just kind of freeze. And in
Yeah.
the case of women, oftentimes,
It
not
is.
only women, but you'll just like smile. You're trying to like submit and like be non-threatening towards whatever this perceived threat is, and that's on their end perceived as like, oh, she was smiling. She was
Yes.
totally into it, not like, please don't hurt me. I'm not a threat to you. And so
Yes.
you just freeze in place. So by not fighting or
Ah.
running away, you're somehow obligated to
So we
be
almost-
in charge of that.
We almost handicapped the whole conversation by omitting one of the states. It's fight, freeze, or run.
Or just you're being submissive, or
Yeah.
You completely ignore it. It's not happening. Denial.
yeah.
Stick my head in the
Or, yeah,
sand.
in that moment, it's
Mhm.
you know, when like if dogs are playing and like the puppy, they're fighting and all the puppy will just like roll over and submit. The puppy's not saying, "Hey, help me." It's like, "Look, I'm not threatening."
Yeah, so I think what happens for me, I don't fight. Very rarely do I fight back.
And we don't feel like you can run away.
I don't,
from a
but that's
situation.
what I want. I want to flee. I don't ever want to confront. I don't want that fight, but I want to flee. But I can't, so then it's like,
Why can't? When you say I can't, what does that mean?
You literally can't run from the room during a
realistically, you
conversation.
can't just run away. Like,
Right.
you can't, like, a lot of times they're just like, I'm done, I'm out, and I'm blah.
Well, we're not like when you're not being attacked by a bear.
Right. If
Kids
it's a
don't run
relationship with a
fast.
person, or
Yeah.
if it's a conversation in a meeting or whatever, you can't always just get up and
If
leave.
you bolt and run from the
I've
room,
seen
you're
Trump
gonna
just get up and leave
Okay.
off. Okay, what are you talking about?
That is-
I
that is
cannot
a-
But
leave.
I would say that is a terrible example.
Yeah,
We're
that's-
talking about a
that's-
completely unhinged,
I'm just saying.
mentally deranged
I'm just saying,
person.
getting up and leaving is a viable answer. When I'm hearing I can't leave, I'm
No, it's
thinking
not-
like, is there
it's
something
not
to
a
talk
viable
about here?
It's not a viable answer if the result you're trying to get out of that requires maintaining a relationship and steering it in a certain direction, even if the person's being highly offensive or just saying
Yes.
things.
So
like,
that's what I think you're gonna say.
So
I
you
want
have
to
to-
flight, but I really need to stay engaged because I need to.
But what happens, I think, is that freeze response. Instead, it's like,
And so by like
Shit, now what?
freezing or not fighting back, you're somehow implying that you agree in
Yes.
some way. We're like, the fuck I done?
Yeah, but let's be really specific of what's happening here. We have fight mode. The response has to be fight back or run away.
no.
No,
No,
it doesn't.
that's
No,
the
what I
entire
mean is
point.
really it does. It just has to. They can't
That's
be.
where they're
So in
for
martial
them
arts,
not
they
to
say
too.
fighting is the last resort. Your
Right.
first step is what? Not to freeze and let them punch you in the face. It's to run away. We have to train ourselves in those moments to be, I gotta move, or I gotta fight. I gotta move, or I gotta fight. I gotta move, or I gotta fight. You can't be like,
No,
Well,
but
that's
but-
literally the entire point of this. Is they're not the only two options.
it's
Yeah.
not.
Yeah.
It's not the only two options. Those are the only two states.
No,
They're-
that's
I'm
what
sorry.
I mean.
They're not the only two states, but there really are the only two options.
no.
And I remember
No.
this specific training that I heard of a flight to a stewardess, whatever they're called, flight attendants, and she said they were trained that in the case of an emergency, a lot of people freeze.
Yeah.
And they will
Yeah.
literally go to the man and grab him by the cojones and squeeze because it just right breaks their brain. They wake up and they're able to get him up and moving. They're like, there's no way I can lift a 250-pound man. I have to get him engaged. And to get him out of freezing, that's what we're trained to do, is just basically hurt him to like wake him back up.
Okay, but
So
martial,
the freeze point, no, well, let me address this. This is a
Yeah.
true story. You're in an airplane that's burning.
No,
You're
no.
on the ground, and freezing is not a valid answer.
but you use
How are
martial-
you saying that?
You use martial arts as an example, and that's actually not a great example for martial arts because in martial arts, your mastery of martial arts is not determined by whether or not you're having a fight reaction. It is actually whether or not you isolate both of those reactions and control the motion all around you.
I agree.
So
I'm
that-
saying you're saying both. I'm saying that one of them is a freeze, and you're saying freeze is a valid state.
I'm saying we're talking about what happens to people, not what
Oh,
what you
I
need to do in a
understand.
specific
I
situation.
agree. I did not say. I said yes. These are three states that happen.
Right.
If freezing is one of the states you default into, it's good to figure out how to not have that state. Or when you recognize, I'm freezing, I'm freezing, I'm freezing. Okay, wake up, I gotta run, or I gotta fight. I gotta run, or I gotta fight. I cannot freeze, I cannot stay in this mode.
Yeah, but
Because I'm gonna get hurt.
you have a fourth state.
What's the fourth state?
The fourth state is moving to a neutral place, assessing, and then being proactive, and the proactivity.
Pulling your mind out of a panic reaction
Right,
into
right.
awareness.
Being proactive does not always mean fighting. It also doesn't always mean running, but it does mean addressing and handling the situation in a mode that you determine.
Well, I would call that whatever you want to call it, active engagement. Thank you. But in active engagement mode, you're in one of those two states.
No,
You're either dealing with the situation, which is termed the word fight. It doesn't literally mean punching someone in the face. Or
Right.
you're removing yourself from the situation and getting your way out of it, not freezing. I'm just saying freezing is not a state to be excited. Yes, people do freeze. I'm saying training has to be done around it. And how does this happen is that is why military, firefighters, whatever, they go through simulation after simulation after simulation. So when they're put in that mode, they know what to do. It's muscle memory. They've already done it in their mind and they can move past that point.
Right.
Why else train in burning buildings if you'll never go in that particular building in the field? They're like, no, because we got to get this so ingrained in you that you know exactly what to do and you don't freeze. Because the minute you freeze, you're going to die inside of that house.
Right.
I'm just saying, like, if you know your response is to freeze, you have to start thinking through these are situations
Gotcha.
and work your way out of that, or you're putting yourself in danger. And it's one thing to be in a boardroom, and it's something totally different to be freezing in the alleyway. And then you end up like, I got beat up, I got mugged, I got raped, and because I couldn't move, I couldn't think. It's like, what
Okay.
could we do to prevent that in the future for yourself? I'm not saying the counter, but I mean, this is just, it's bad.
I would say using rape is probably another terrible example.
Is it?
Yes,
But why?
because there's a lot of other factors that go into that have nothing to do with whether or not the person froze.
I'm not saying that. I am saying specifically if you froze, and you could be a man getting raped by another man, I mean, whatever the situation is, they're training. Like if you go to martial art training, they'll tell you scream loud, kick, but it's because they're training people that if they're in that moment, they immediately go away from freeze and they have to go into one of the two states. A lot of our reaction is to freeze,
Yes.
right? Sometimes
yes.
it's just so shocking and so catastrophic, the first reaction is just to sit there, right? But and that's why the difference between people that are able to capture and capitalize on your freezing versus movement. And I'll give you an example unrelated to rape. There's a rule that said the 20-foot rule and related to police officers and guns, and I think they even increased the rule. What is the 20-foot rule, or what is the 20-foot thing? And I can drop a link in here from YouTube. Actually, anybody can grab it. It's pretty simple. What it says is that, watch this, a police officer that sees a person with a knife, holding a knife, sees the person. If their gun is holstered, if that person is 20 feet or less from the person, from the officer, the chances of the officer getting stabbed on them charging at them is significant. Mostly
Yes.
they're gonna get stabbed.
Yes.
And 20 feet sounds like a big distance, and if you see it, it's a pretty good sized distance. But what happens is the attacker knows what they're doing, and the officer has to get out of the freeze response and then make the motion and pull out the gun and all these things. And so
Yeah.
that's why they try to keep that distance.
Right.
But that is a trained police officer who has gone through the police academy, not me, that has never been attacked by a knife in the street before.
I would say lightly trained, but yes.
I'm saying that even that person, lightly trained or whatever, it's still such a distance, right? That they get stabbed. So what does that mean for a guy like me who's just walking down the street and all of a sudden somebody
Yeah.
has a knife? Somebody has a knife across the street and may look like I'm in a safe place, but I'm really not, because the minute that guy starts to run across the street, my brain is going like, why is he running? Oh my God, he's got a knife in his hand. What am I gonna do? And he's already on top of me. I'm dead.
I mean, yeah, the 20-foot rule is very, very true. Like,
It is a very, very true. All I'm saying is that we all go to that freeze response. It's inherent, I think, in all of us. And that's why we're forced to train to get away from that. I don't think there's a Navy SEAL that ever went to training. I'm sure there's some few guys. But I think a lot of them probably have freeze responses that have been trained out of them because they have that experience.
I would, not in that example,
And what example?
the SEAL example. So there's a very specific reason why most special operators end up in that position in the first place, it's because the fight response for them also releases dopamine. And so they look for it.
Yeah.
That's fine, but I'm saying to go from I'm walking down, I'm in a battlefield, I'm
Right.
walking in a field and don't see anything,
Right?
right? To I have to identify, shoot, fight,
Those actually
or
don't-
all of those things. These are all happening,
those
obviously.
but those are all happening. They're happening before the threat shows up.
How does that mean?
So remember I talked about the whole like my process for reflecting on things
Yes.
and how it's basically an ingrained habit. That's the same thing with special operators or anyone that's been decently trained. You're always assessing for threats. You're always thinking of a
That's the
threat
point
first.
that you just said. My whole point was, what'd you say?
You're-
Consistently trained, specially trained.
Right.
That's all. My whole point is that freezing is not a valid response. It is a response we get into, but if you want to survive a situation and be able to deal with it, you need to be able to move off of freeze. That's all I'm saying.
Okay.
Hmm.
Because it's just saying, like, you're just using a bunch of examples that, like, don't apply in a lot of those cases.
I disagree. I would love to find a special operator and ask him, like, how did you become so fucking good at this? Like, you walk in a room and see a guy and you know, don't shoot kid, shoot guy head. Like, how do you do that? Like, man, we've been training. We do the same thing 10,000 hours,
Yeah,
of course.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I would freeze too. I wouldn't know, like, is that a kid? Is that I don't want to shoot the kid. You know, we have rules of engagement and all these other things. I don't want to buy like this stuff. So they're going to tell you, well, we've been trained, we've been trained, we've been trained. What do? You get shot. How do you handle that situation? We've been trained, we've been trained, we've been trained. You're seeing blood come out of your buddy's leg. What do you do? I don't know. We know. We go.
Right.
Surely they're going to say that. I've never talked to anybody like this. I'm just modeling what their training would be like. It can't be. It has to be that everything becomes a second response.
Yeah, but it's not an unconscious response. It's an active response.
You think so?
Right.
I don't think so. I think it's an unconscious response at that point. They're so trained.
It's not unconscious.
It's conscious?
It's very conscious.
You think so?
Yes.
Oh.
It's active engagement. That's actually one of the reasons why it's so hard to switch back into civilian mode is because everything is active engagement.
Yes. So and
You're-
yeah, go ahead, sorry.
Well, I'm just saying, like, you're constantly assessing.
Yep.
So, like, it is the training piece, but it's also it's a combination of training and then, like, your natural ability to be able to exist in that constant mode of response, like target, assess, respond, target,
Yeah.
assess, respond. And that's a high stress place. Like, that's the other thing too, is a lot of people will, like, advocate SEALs and everything else, and then, like, there's a lot of stress load that happens in that case. And if stress is not something that also is relaxing for you, then you will not function well in any of those situations.
So to take that on the flip side, so when I worked at the drop zone skydiving place,
Mm-hmm.
we had some pretty serious accidents. And that's where I learned that I respond to emergencies just very calmly, logically, can respond, whatever. We had a couple of medical staff there who, this is what they do, and they froze every
Right.
time,
Right.
could not function.
Because they were in a this is my fun hobby brain, not I am at work, I am a
But, right,
Whatever.
but if it's your
Yeah.
natural response to go and help and
Right,
triage,
right.
you're gonna do it. If it's not, if it's something you're trained to do,
But it's not your natural
but
response.
you're
Yeah.
not gonna do it. And
You're-
it would take them a good 30 seconds to a couple of minutes to be like, oh shit, I'm supposed to be doing
oh
something.
crap, I know how to do all this stuff.
Yes.
So that's the reason why, in a lot of cases, police officers and even, like, you know, people that enlist in the Army are actually not supposed to be there, because a lot of times that is not their natural response.
Yeah.
That is not a natural place for them to be. They're there for other reasons, you know, job accessibility, benefits, whatever.
Patriotism, whatever.
all that stuff.
Yeah.
And that's the reason why we have so many terrible cases of PTSD, because a lot of people are not supposed to be there. And we don't really have, as our society is so far removed from danger, we don't have a good selection process for weeding out people that should and should not be there.
Yeah.
I understand.
So,
Yeah.
and the other half of that is that a bunch of people that are naturally, like, biologically set up to live in those situations turn into the people that we lock up. Because it used to be you put
Yeah.
all your psychos in the front line and they would mostly kill each other because they were defending the country, and then
Yeah.
like a couple of them came back, and you're like,
Give them a
cool,
weapon.
we're okay with you being psychotic because you're our psychotic person, and we're gonna
You're our crazy monster.
right. We give you the house over there and, like, you know, honor you as a warrior
You
or
know the
whatever.
frontier. You
Because we know your life expectancy is not that far, and, like, you get an outlet for all that rage.
Yeah.
So now we don't have that, And that's one of the reasons why we get very extreme situations where some people that are set up for that get very far before they get called in, such as
Yeah.
the dude that's getting pardoned right now.
Who?
There is a special operator that is getting
Oh, yes.
pardoned right now. He's a straight up war criminal, and his natural state is to be a psychotic, murderous bastard.
Yeah.
And like everybody else around him, trained exactly the same way, set up for the same responses. Like that one is insane.
Yeah. That one. Yeah.
Yeah, like we're scared of him and we're awesome. Like,
Right. And so
All my training can't protect me if I can't sleep because he's sleeping in the same room.
so that's kind of that situation of like, you know, we've definitely all gone away from that, but people that are naturally set up for that response belong in certain situations that we have basically
Yes.
tried to get rid of.
Yeah.
So I heard the
Retrospection.
so one of the things you can do, so here's for you to mental model for all you guys out there wondering, and we'll end on this note. It's 11:11. That in this situation of somebody getting hurt or some catastrophe happening around you, some accident, whatever it is, and if you're there dealing with the situation and you need help and there's people around you, you cannot assume that the people around you are going to help just because they're around you.
Aware of the situation, depending on what it is.
No, let's say I said they're around you and they're aware of it. That said, all you have to do is tell them, hey, guy in the red shirt, make a phone call. Hey, girl in the purple pants, go get me a towel. And they'll snap out of it and they'll go. And they want to help. Their brain just doesn't get out of that freeze mode. And you can help them by literally giving them very specific instructions.
Yeah,
And that's something,
first aid training.
yeah, that's something I read about. And that's really why. It's because, again, they just freeze. They don't know what to do.
Even if they want to help, it's just I literally have no idea what
Yeah,
to
their
do.
brain is not there yet. It's going
You're
back
literally
to,
with your phone in your hand. It's like, what do I do? Take your phone and call 911.
yes. So simple
Oh,
stuff
I
like
can do
that,
that.
directing people to specific outcomes that you're needing and really, really increase the number of people that are helping you out and solving the problem. And that's why there's a story, if it's a very famous story, I think from the 60s, where there was a woman that was attacked and killed and raped in the middle of the street in New York, and there were all these people that watched, and
Oh,
nobody
actually,
did anything. And
really good documentary about that. That kind of disproves a lot of that. What
Oh.
was the mythos that came up around it? So
Ooh,
yeah,
that'd be
I
interesting
need
to
to
watch.
find the name of it.
Well,
it's
well-
on HBO.
so we need to watch that and talk about that. Yeah. So what
Yeah,
I only
yeah,
heard was
that's
that
all
a
I know.
lot of
It's
times people will not react if they don't know that they needed to react. They always thought somebody else was going to do it, and blah 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 blah. So, anyways, we'll talk about it.
Yeah, no, that was really good and really.
Yeah, and it
heartbreaking.
wasn't that they don't care and
Yeah,
those
that
type of
was
things.
what
That's
it was.
not.
It was like people called and a lot of stuff. seemed
Really?
to-
Yeah, I really would love to see
yeah,
that.
Yeah.
So,
So-
Guy
so
from
we-
Mars, Ace Platinum, everybody that's on Facebook.
Well, we had questions that we didn't answer that were on my feed, so they're more about how we do reflection and retrospection in building your business or during your business
Okay.
when it faces issues. So we might want to continue
I'm
this
definitely
tomorrow
yours.
because that was the whole point of the whole day.
So part 2 is dealing with business versions of these activities.
Yes.
Yes.
That's a great. So, I would love anybody who's interested in those questions to submit that conversation, submit some very specific questions on your business. That would be really, really helpful. And then even on our side, if we can think through, very
Mhm.
specific things like what do you do if you have to hire or fire somebody and blah blah blah. So stuff like that. So any questions like that, please just let us know.
Awesome.
Otherwise, thank you everybody for tuning in to our fun and lively conversation.
Yay.
Again, Abe wins the debates, so
Nope.
Abe is up 4,000.
Abe
Janica is at
participates.
1.
He
Red
was-
Riot's got 0, and Ellis he's high. He's just really high. Don't worry about it. I'm gonna give an actual number because he's like he'll start to graph it and then show me how an regression chart that I'm not right. We'll
Don't worry, when we
I guess
reflect upon this in a minute,
He'll get very
We'll know.
sophisticated.
we'll know.
We'll know the
You
reality.
really should be tuning into the post show and the pre show. That's when it gets really wild. We're actually on our best behavior during the cameras.
Some of us are.
Emily's never on her best behavior. Talk to you guys later. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Peace.